Hello, and welcome to tonight's Vicki and Carl Zeiger Virtual Insight Seminar. I'm Justin Waldman, Associate Artistic Director at the Old Globe, and on behalf of Tim Shields, our Audrey S. Geisel Managing Director, I'm so glad you can join us tonight to chat with our Erna, Finci, Viterbi Artistic Director and Director of Hamlet on the Radio, Barry Edelstein, who will also welcome you himself when he arrives in our magic box in just a few minutes. I am coming to you from the ancestral home of the Kumeyaay, who have been the stewards of these lands for generations. Before we get started, I would like to take a second to recognize the people who have made this event possible. A massive thank you to Vicki and Carl Zeiger for their generous support of the Vicki and Carl Zeiger Virtual Insight Seminars. And also a special thank you to Joanne Kilty for her support of me in my role as host. The Globe and I are so grateful to all of you. If you want to enjoy more of these conversations with Globe artists, please consider making a gift to our Globe Rising campaign. The link will be down in the chat. Your support will sustain us until we can open our doors once again, which pleasant day is fast approaching. This round of Virtual Insight Seminars has focused on the Globe's production of Hamlet on the Radio and the incredible artists that have made it possible. None more important than Barry himself. Barry and I are going to talk for about 30 minutes or so, and then we're going to open the floor up to questions. Well, that's it for me. So now, with a big drum roll, it's our time to welcome our incredible guest, Barry Edelstein. Barry, please make your magical entrance. I conjure you. Yes, Barry, you're here. Wonderful. Oh, wow. Yeah, there you are.
Nice to see you, Justin.
It's great to see you. It's been a long time since we've been on a Zoom together.
Yeah, right. 2 seconds. Here's the other thing is that we're actually a very short walk from each other.
I know. I could probably stand on our decks.
Here in South Park, we could shout to each other.
Oh my God. Well, it's great to see you. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
It's a pleasure to have you in our Virtual Insight Seminar. And thank you for gracing us. It's a real pleasure. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit, as I always do, by giving out your bio, which is amazing. So Barry's the director of Hamlet on the Radio and is also the Globe's Erna, Finci, Viterbi Artistic Director, which is a Latin phrase meaning COVID compliance officer. Barry has directed 5 Shakespeares at the Old Globe: Hamlet, Othello, Romeo and Juliet, The Winter's Tale, and All's Well That Ends Well. He's directed on all 4 Globe stages, including Globe for All, and most recently directed the American premiere of the musical Life After and the world premiere of Anna Ziegler's The Wanderers, which won the Craig Noll Award for Best New Play, which will be being seen sometime in the future somewhere on another coast, which I don't know if I can actually talk about, but not yet.
Soon.
Sorry. His Thinking Shakespeare Live, the sonnets and infinite book editions have been staples of the Globe's digital offerings during our shutdown. Before we wrestled him away from New York, he was the director of the Shakespeare Initiative at the Public Theater and was the artistic director of Classic Stage Company. He's directed across the country from the LA Philharmonic to the Public Theater in New York and many places in between, all with great aplomb. And he is also a writer for his book, Thinking Shakespeare, which is the standard text on American Shakespeare acting, and also the author of Bardisms, Shakespeare for All Occasions, which is a really fun book. I love that one. He is a graduate of Tufts University, as am I, go Jumbos.
Go Jumbos.
And the University of Oxford, where he studied as a Rhodes Scholar. He is a marvelous father to Augie and Tilly Rose, and a great husband to the fabulous Halit, and a true gentleman of the theater. And I'm very proud to be able to work with him on a daily basis. Everybody, big round of applause for Barry Edelstein.
Nice. Thank you, Justin. What a nice introduction. Fabulous. Thank you. Good to be with you here. I mean, it's like being on the Dick Cavett show or something.
There's a curtain you can walk through when we do it live, right?
Great.
These sequins and stuff. So first off, happy early birthday to William Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a day early.
Big day tomorrow.
He's a jolly good fellow and all those things, which is also the premiere of Hamlet on the Radio on Kpbs.
Yep.
7 o'clock, 98.5 FM. There's the plug.
It's a big Shakespeare day. Then they're going to have this very highly acclaimed National Theater Romeo and Juliet on TV at 9. So you can go listen to Hamlet on the Radio, flip on your TV, catch Romeo and Juliet. All for Shakespeare's birthday.
Doubling down. It's all on brand, right? Let's talk Hamlet. It's the world's most famous play. You're one of America's most preeminent Shakespeareans. Like, How did this play come into your life? Do you remember when you first read it? What were your initial impressions of it?
Yeah, I don't remember when I first read it. Probably would have been not high school, which was Julius Caesar, that I remember. My daughter's in 8th grade is reading Romeo and Juliet, and those are the two that American school curricula really generally start with. Sometimes maybe Midsummer Night's Dream, but which is so funny because let's do political assassination with the 8th grade this year, and then we'll switch to teen suicide next class. Weird.
Mine was Scottish, so.
Really interesting. I haven't heard of high school Scottish. Interesting to do. Well, at least has the virtue of being a little shorter, right? So I probably first came across Hamlet, college, I guess. One knows about it. Obviously, you know about it. This guy with the skull and the story and the ghost, and but it's funny. It's such a great question because reeling back into my memory, I don't really recall the first time I came across it. I do remember seeing it. I remember the first one that I saw, not the movies, because I guess I had seen Olivier's movie or one of the earlier movies, but I do remember seeing Mark Rylance do it when I was in England, when I went to a graduate school, and I went to the Royal Shakespeare Company to see him. He was an unknown, like hot young kid coming up at the time. And he did this production that critics still refer to as the pajamas Hamlet. His idea was when Hamlet went mad, he just walked around the palace in his pajamas. And so he had this set of pajamas, and bare feet. And it was really stunning. I don't remember much else about the production except this actor that even as young and naive and relatively lacking knowledge about theater as I was at that point, I just went, oh my God, this guy is so incredibly special. He turns out later to be Mark Rylance. And I can tell people, oh yeah, I saw his Royal Shakespeare Company debut when he played the pajamas Hamlet, right? So this would have been 87, 88, something like that. And, so kind of extraordinary.
How many do you think you've seen?
I've seen 22 or 23 of them, I think. I've made something of a collector's, I've seen them in different languages. I've seen most of the movies, maybe not all. And it's amazing to see a play that many times because, the story stays the same. Sometimes people will edit out one piece or another, or do, and then their tricks, the Bergman famous where they shoot Horatio, the gunman murder Horatio, go bid the soldier shoot, which is now a cliche of other people's productions of that play. And of course, the reason to go see it again is to see what this group of artists are going to find there. Right. And that's the joy. What is this director emphasizing? What has that actor figured out? Oh my God, there's a genius playing Rosencrantz. I've never understood Rosencrantz. Now I do. Right. And that's the reason to keep coming back again and again and again, because the play is like an onion and you peel away the layers and it just reveals more and more and more. So yeah, I intend to keep on collecting them.
At like 3 to 4 hours a pop, that's close to 100 hours of Hamlet.
Not all of them were uncut, I've seen some student ones. I did a student one when I was in graduate school at Oxford, outdoors in this courtyard of one of the Oxford colleges. And my friends call it the No Hamlet, not because it was done in the Japanese No theater style, but because about half an hour into the show, the young actor playing Hamlet had some kind of psychotic break and screamed out "no" and ran off stage. And so we had to stop the show. And I don't know what, to this day, I don't know what actually happened to him. I'm surmising it was some kind of break. I don't really know. And we found him. He was in distress and just, buckling under the strain of playing Hamlet as a 20-year-old Oxford undergraduate. We talked him back on the stage and on he went after a little break. So
oh man.
No Hamlet.
I was gonna ask, like, did you know you always wanted to direct it? Like, were you intimidated by it? So, like, apparently that person was very intimidated by it.
Yeah, he was very, yeah. I mean, it turned out that there was something in his life that got triggered by something in the play, and one shouldn't. I can tell jokes about it now because he's okay. He wasn't at the time. It was a little bit of a weird experience.
Yeah.
Legendary in my circle of friends who were there and still bust my chops about it. I've always, obviously, the play, as you move your way through life, talks to you in different ways, and I don't think it's uncommon. I'm sure you had this experience too. It's a young man's play because it's a story of this very sensitive soul who's feeling put upon by the circumstances of the world, right? And so you sort of, as a young man, even though Hamlet in the text says that he's 30, he is a college-age kid, and we all feel at that age in our lives this strange sense of empathy and connection and identification with them. So, I remember feeling that. I remember feeling, I hear myself in it and I find myself in it and I just want to go working on it. So I just, thundered forward and did it.
And in 2017, we did it here at the Globe. And so why was that the right time? Why was it then? It was like ready to do it. And what did you want to do with it? Was there something that you were like, right now is right because I want to do this with it?
Well, the play had been, the play was showing up in my life every few years. When I got out of graduate school, I was working at the Public Theater in New York. Kevin Kline played Hamlet. He had done it once before and didn't feel like he had found everything in it that he wanted. So he convinced Joe Papp to let him direct himself when he did it the second time. And he hired me to be his assistant, which was a major event in my life, being around Kevin Kline for, almost a year between the preparation and then the rehearsal and then the run of the show. And we're still very close friends. It was just a deep bonding experience. Then in my second tour of duty at the Public Theater, the great Michael Stuhlbarg played Hamlet and Oscar Eustis directed it in Shakespeare in the Park. So I worked on it then, and it just was sort of cycling through my life every few years. When I got the job at the Globe, I thought, well, eventually Hamlet's going to come around. I suppose it was at the Globe maybe 2-3 years before I showed up as artistic director, something like that. And what happened, frankly, and not the easiest thing in the world to talk about, is my father passed away in 2016 at age 86 of natural causes. And I remember so very distinctly being at his bedside in a hospice in New Jersey, and the lines of Hamlet just like thundering into my head in an uncanny kind of way, because nature's common theme is death of fathers. Your father had a father, that your father lost a father, that father lost his, all this stuff. And of course, the play is very, very centrally about the psychic burden on Hamlet of his father's death and what it is to be a person in this world when your father dies, in particular, what it is to be a man in this world when your father dies. And so I just thought at that time, I remember coming back to San Diego after my father's passing and saying, well, I guess we should do Hamlet. And because that following year, 2017, we did. So it really was just me honoring the weirdness and the power of the play showing up in my heart and in my mind at that moment of extreme emotion in my life. And I wondered if there was a way to put my grief to some positive purpose by channeling it into the play. And so that's what we did.
I mean, they say all art is personal in that way, where it's like if you have that in there, there's a way to enter the piece with something that's so personal, and that came across in this production in like so much, because the detail and that passion and that that emotion was so palpable throughout the production. So it's amazing when something like that is like that the impetus of something coming out of something so hard creates something so beautiful on the other end of it. So I appreciate you sharing that. I know that's hard. It's difficult to talk about. I want to talk about, it was so gorgeous, and it was so gorgeous. I want to talk about the physical production a little bit.
Oh, sure.
So I'm going to share screen here while give me a second while I do that.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the design process a little bit for the show, because it is such a beautiful piece. I mean, it was so spare, but such a stark, amazing statement that you made with this visually.
Yeah.
What was the design process like, and how did you create this visual palette?
Well, I got a lot of incredibly talented people around, and that's, Tim Maccabee, the set designer, and Kate O'Connor, who did the costumes, and Steve Strawbridge, who lit it. And, those are the things you can see. Then, Sten Severson, who did the sound, who's designed the sound rig out at that theater, and Jacob Gregorio Rosenbaum, Curtis Moore's music. We'll talk about all of that. But a lot of talent comes together. Directors get a lot of credit for conceiving things, but it's being the captain of a very big team who's all pushing and moving in the same direction. A couple of things I would say about it. I've done a ton of Shakespeare. I tend not to like to do overly descriptive physical settings. I prefer to do more neutral setting. Not neutral is the wrong word, because this has a very strong personality. But I've not done very many naturalistic, like castles or houses or stuff like that. I tend to do more metaphoric kind of spaces. Mm-hmm. I was thinking very strongly at the time about this tremendous period at the Delacorte Theater in New York, which after the Old Globe's outdoor theater is the other great outdoor summer Shakespeare theater, right? The Delacorte's 3 times the size of ours, but they're very, very similar theaters, right down to the same green plastic seats. There was a period in the Delacorte when a genius by the name of Ming-Cho Lee, a set designer, really redefined what Shakespeare in America could look like with these scaffold-like sets that were very tall, had a lot of levels, had a lot of people running up and down, but that had maybe some wood, maybe some stone. They were not literal places. They were these skeletal things. Well, it turns out Ming-Cho Lee went on to become the head of design at the Yale School of Drama. And, he died not too long ago, and 2 generations of American theater designers were trained by him, including this guy named Tim Maccabee, who went to the Yale School of Drama. And I remember saying to him, what would be fun if we could find a way to do a 21st century version of what Ming did at the Delacorte in the early 60s. And, Tim's first reaction was, he was my teacher and he used to tear apart everything that I did. You really want me to do that? Like, yes, that's what we did. And so what you see there with those pieces of scaffolding that moved around and those gold platforms, it is kind of Tim's response to the imaginative challenge. How would you interpret Ming-Cho Lee's Delacorte Shakespeare in 2017? Mm-hmm. And a lot more went into it about why is it gold? Well, what is Claudius's court like? All that stuff. Mm-hmm. The other thing I knew I wanted to do was do the costumes in a period way, but not on the nose. And I had worked in New York with this amazing designer named Kate O'Connor, who's a painter and a visual artist and also a costume designer, and wild, and known for having this very wild imagination, which you can see in these photos. And the secret sauce here is the Globe as a producing organization, because we have this world-renowned costume shop. Every costume designer I've ever spoken to in the 9 years that I've been here has said, you have the best costume shop in North America. I say, yes, I do. I know that. And I thought, let's let them loose. Let's let the costume shop loose. Let's go raid 80 years of stock and collage things together. Let's build. You can see on the right on that frame is the Queen Gertrude sitting there. That's a dress that we made here at the Globe. I think Grantham's red outfit we made, but Johnny on the left and Osric in the middle, that's all collaged together from 85 years of Shakespeare at the Old Globe, and then colors are changed and manipulated by Kate's wild imagination. So it was a fantastic team, and I just sort of set them loose. By this point in the play, there's nothing else on the stage except that big statue. So all that other stuff went away, and just this amazing rainbow of costumes and textures took over the space. It was great. It worked great.
It's amazing when like that changes, like those that you went, but it always felt full because all these different people, like there's very little there, but you always feel like, oh my God, it's so full. Like
helps that some of those dresses are 8 feet wide.
Yeah, they need a parking space. You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Yep.
But the coup de grace, right, is the ghost.
Yeah.
He came up with the ghost with this light up costume, which is unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this on stage in my life. And it was so cool. Breathtaking when he comes out turning on. How did you beta test it? How did you know it was?
Well, I mean, the technical wizardry belongs to a whole lot of other people. I remember, obviously, the idea of my father's own death led me to thinking about keeping the presence of the father in the show very powerfully, which is where that big statue of a monument to the ghost came from. And I ended up giving the ghost, there it is, thank you. So we wanted that to be there as the father physically present, looming over Hamlet throughout the show. And I gave the ghost some more entrances in the play than Shakespeare did. I brought the ghost in a couple of times where Shakespeare doesn't have him. And so it obviously had to be something special. And you sit down with your collaborators and say, how are we going to do a ghost? Make him look gray and rotten. There have been productions where he's invisible. There's a fantastic Christopher Plummer movie of Hamlet that you can see on YouTube where the ghost is invisible and they just cut to a close-up on Christopher Plummer's face and you hear the ghost speaking. There's a famous production in England where Jonathan Pryce played Hamlet and did his own father's voice coming through him like it had possessed his body, right? There's 9 billion ways to do it. And we said, well, what do we want to do? And somebody said, and I wish I could remember who. I'd like to think it was me, but I don't think it actually was. Said, well, what if he lights up? What if he glows? And that led to a process that involved battery packs. I think Michael had 8 or 9 battery packs on him. God knows how many yards of fiber optic lines running through that thing, some LEDs, and it was all controlled in the control booth at the back of the theater, and somebody could flick a switch and suddenly all this stuff would glow. It was really, really stunning.
It's an amazing feat. And you're right, just how many different departments had to work on that between costumes, electric, props,
yep, everybody. And the scene on the right there, it looks like they're on the ground. They're not. They're on the top of one of these towers, like 10 feet tall or something like that, maybe higher. And that thing was on wheels and moved around. And so it literally looked like they were just floating in the dark in the middle of the night. This guy all lit up. It was wonderful, wonderful effect. And only a theater like the Globe could pull something like that off,
It's unbelievable. In like against the night sky where we were, you were kind of looking up at it, and it just definitely that floating feeling was so
yeah, it was special sequence.
So Hamlet's not Hamlet without Hamlet, and you had a great Hamlet, Grantham Coleman, who we talked to a couple weeks ago. How'd you find Grantham? And like,
well,
Justin, when you knew?
You're a big part of that. I don't know if our audience watching is aware of how central you are to the casting efforts at the Globe, especially our Shakespeare's. And, it's a conversation between the director and the casting director, in this case, a very eminent New York casting director named Jim Carnahan, and you. So, you're very powerfully about how the Globe discovers talent. And Grantham was a guy that I remembered crossing paths with. He went to Juilliard. And, many years previous, I had gone there and taught a master class when he was still there. And I remember he did a scene from Othello, and I was, struck by him even then, this like incredibly charismatic, beautiful, powerful, and skilled Shakespearean. And then when I was still at the Public, his first job out of Juilliard was as the ensemble in Shakespeare in the Park. They have a system much like we do, which is actors graduating from the drama schools tend to get their first gig as an ensemble, a spear carrier, a furniture mover, or a tiny 1 or 2 line part. And so he was in, I think it was All's Well That Ends Well. And so I knew him then. And I strongly knew that I wanted to have an African-American actor play the part because of the work the Globe was doing in equity, diversity, and inclusion and casting. And also because weirdly, there just haven't been that many Black Hamlets, one or two, but very, very few, and especially very few on a major stage like the Globe. So that was something I knew was there. And so we had a list of wonderful, young, talented African-American Shakespeareans. Grantham came in. You were in the room, I think, when that day that he read it.
I picked him up from the train station.
Yeah, I remember you. That's right. You picked him up and brought him over to the Globe. And 2 lines in, you're like, oh, that's our guy. That's got to be who it is. And we've since become quite good friends. And his career, as post Hamlet, he went on to play Benedict at Shakespeare in the Park in New York. He's got a big booming TV career. He played Martin Luther King on Broadway in the second of those LBJ plays. He's just like stunning, huge star, and he was a thrilling, wonderful Hamlet. One other thing, I think, he's the only one of 2 actors I know this to be true. Kevin Kline, when he played Hamlet, told me that for his life as an actor, he always kept a copy of Hamlet in his pocket. Just everywhere he went, he just had a Hamlet. And if he was sitting on the subway, would just read it. Sitting, waiting for somebody, would just read it. Grantham's the only other actor I know of whom that's true. Just carried Hamlet around, and destined to play the part.
Meant to be.
And he got to do it. It's wonderful.
That's so great. It's so great. It's so great to be able to create that relationship with him too. That he did the LA Phil Tempest with you. Yep. But in this production had some amazing friends of the Globe, friends of your the Barry Edelstein troupe of repertory actors. There's Cornell Womack as Claudius. There's Johnny Orsini as Laertes. As Patrick Kerr. So what's it like when you have a great knack of bringing back actors and having people that are part of your family? What's important about that, and why do you continually collaborate?
I'm so moved that after having worked with me once, they're willing to work with me a second time. That's very nice of them. One of the things, Justin, is I've just been at this a long time, and after a while, you start to realize the kind of person that you want to be around, because these experiences are intense. First of all, you're laying your guts on the table. My father died and I'm doing Shakespeare, and it's extremely emotional. This play is long and a heavy lift, and you've got to go to some very intense places, a lot of complicated sequences that you have to do. And you just want to be in the room with people who are nice and who are, supportive of each other. And, right? I mean, talented, absolutely, that goes without saying. The best actors in America that you can conceivably get. But, you also want it to be an experience that's happy, because you're not going to be as creative as you can if the room is tense and weird and hard to walk into every morning. So when I find someone, that guy in the middle, John Orsini there, I mean, the guy is just a spectacular human being, a spectacular human being, kind and generous and warm, and you just want to be around him. So any excuse I have to get him into a show. Cornell was a student of mine back at Juilliard. Opal was a student of mine back at Juilliard, and you just collect these relationships and cherish them. There's a line that Hamlet says, bind them to thy soul with hoops of steel, right? So that's what you do. And I'm happy to see those relationships continue. I don't know what the next Grantham will be, but we'll find one.
Speaking of the cast as a whole, this was an amazingly diverse cast, a beautiful group of people and a beautifully diverse cast. Why was it important for this group to tell this story?
Well, Justin, you've been so absolutely central to the work that we've been doing at the Globe on diversity on stage. Now we're very deep into a process about diversity and representation in every other corner of the institution. But there's something about this play that you want to say if your premise is that Shakespeare belongs to everybody, then Hamlet had better belong to everybody. And that means that there's a way for people from every kind of background where, I mean, in that picture there, I would lose count of the number of ethnicities that are represented, the number of regions of the United States that are represented. There's even somebody from India there in the first row, Ajinkya Desai, who was a student of ours, right? And like, what a glorious thing to be able to say to the world, we can do Shakespeare and everybody's voice can find expression in this. And the fact that the show worked as well as it did and was as commercially successful or box office success that it was, just vindicated our feeling that the Globe has an important role to play in making opportunities for actors who wouldn't necessarily otherwise get those opportunities, but also depicting a universe where all these groups are together speaking the lines of the greatest writer and it all seeming right. So it was just a great process from that point of view.
That it is one of the casts I'm most proud of that we put together.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful group. And it's amazing that we got to bring them back together. How rare does that happen? We get the band back together for Hamlet on the radio. So like, how did this collaboration come about with Kpbs?
Well, the pandemic has been so challenging, and the Globe made a decision very early on that we weren't just going to shut down. And there have been theaters around the country that said, listen, we're just going to hibernate. And I totally get it. And I understand why that's a sensible decision for those theaters to have made. But we felt we had to somehow figure out a way to keep serving the public through theater, to mean what we say about making theater matter to more people, to provide theater as a public good, also to keep our people working. So, you know, we did stuff on Zoom and we did stuff on Facebook Live and we did all kinds of experiments. And eventually I thought, okay, radio would be a good idea. And the catalyst of it was figuring out what to do with the Grinch. So we went to Kpbs and said, look, the way we think we can do the Grinch this year, 2020, when we're not going to be able to do it live because of COVID, is to do it on the radio. And our friends at Kpbs were great and said, yes, let's do it. Our friends at Dr. Seuss were great and said, let's do it. And then I thought, well, let's make it more than one. Let's make sure it's not a one-off. And the other big show sitting there was Hamlet. So I thought, I wonder if we could put the Hamlet back together as a radio adaptation and go to Kpbs with a 1-2 plan. Grinch first, Hamlet second. And they were ecstatic about it. And so we started doing it.
It's been so lovely working with them. Everybody there has been so pleasant and so lovely and such great collaborators.
Yep.
You know, so it's just been, the second time was like, it felt like, we can do this now. The first one was harder and this one was like, this is fantastic. Yeah. So what was it like returning to Denmark, albeit virtually, but coming back to a play that you've already done?
Yeah, it was really fun and interesting to go back in. I mean, the freshness of my father's death now 4 years ago wasn't quite the emotional engine of it. And so the experience was more like this feeling of reaching across the void and reaching out of isolation to make contact with the world via this iconic piece of our culture, you know? And
Zoom.
And you know, too much Zoom, you know, my God, like when are we going to be able to say goodbye to Zoom? I hope pretty soon. You know, now radio theater has been around as long as there's been radio. In the 1920s, people were doing plays on the radio. Shakespeare's been a very central part of that, in particular in America, because Orson Welles started his career doing Shakespeare on the radio, right? That was right alongside his early experiments in the theater, where his Shakespeare on the radio experiments. He's got a Hamlet that if you Google Orson Welles radio Hamlet, you can find it from 1932 or something like that, right? So there's a long tradition of this stuff. The difference is they got everybody together in a studio and did the play, right? Just basically had them do the play and stuck microphones in front of everybody. We could not do that. So we had to get everybody recorded separately in their homes and have Zoom as the medium that was bringing them all together. And because you want to eliminate echo and try and get a decent sound. That meant people in their closets. You can see Grantham sitting in there in his coat closet, or in a walk-in closet in his house. You can see Opal in the lower left there, same idea, right? So the Globe sent out identical recording kits to everybody. They all found a place to go sit. And even though they were communicating with each other via Zoom, their own microphone was only recording themselves. So then they uploaded those files, and the sound folks had 27 different files for however many people it was, 24, right? And started editing it together. It's an amazing feat. So it sounds like they're all in the same space, when in fact they were scattered all over the place. I think Johnny in that picture's in Puerto Rico, where he was shooting a film.
He was shooting a movie and brought his kit with him. And
so there you see 4 different time zones. You got Johnny in Puerto Rico, Opal was in New York, Grantham was in Houston, and I was in San Diego, and we're all working together on this thing.
Making Hamlet, making magic happen. So how does your job as a director change from on stage into the radio realm?
Well, two things. One is, I've dabbled my toe into camera directing, but not in any real or deep way. But you work out of order. So the actors were fine with it. They work out of order all the time, but we don't. In the theater, we work in order. And we recorded this thing over 3 weeks. Jumping all over the place. We had was it 5 weeks? Yeah. Was it 5 weeks? Yeah. There were a series of like 4 or 5 hour sessions sprinkled out over the course of many weeks. And we would gather some little group together and do a bit of it. Stop, jump around, do another bit. And, in post-production, you can sew all that together. The big question for all of us was how to use the medium, right? What do we do? Do we attempt the size and scope of a stage performance, or do we allow ourselves to come right down into the mic and get super intimate like that? And the first couple of days, we tried a little bit of that, and it felt just lacking in energy, lacking in vividness. So then we went to, okay, let's be nice and big. And it just felt like it was blowing out. So it took a long time of experimentation to sort of figure out what tone we wanted to hit. And we've been able to, some sequences, when you listen to it tomorrow night, you'll hear very intimately done, using the microphone to like get inside the thoughts of the characters, especially when they're in soliloquy. Other times, it sounds big and boisterous, just like it does on stage. The interesting thing was to watch the actors. We got almost everybody back, and we actually been able to add a couple of actors who weren't in the 2017 production, and to listen to how it had marinated in them, how it had deepened and matured. How Grantham, just like I, was 4 years older, had 4 more years of experience, and brought a richness to it that was so rewarding. It's got a wonderful depth and a lived-in feeling to it that's really special.
I always love that idea. I talk about it with playwrights a lot. It's like when someone writes something, puts it away, and it comes back to it. Like, you're a different person now than you were when you started it. And like, does your intent still stay the same? What have you learned that you didn't know in that person? So you're almost having a conversation with yourself as the artist that you were 4 years ago and the artist that you are now. And what does that conversation happen?
Yeah,
that's an amazing alchemy as well.
It was just great to see everybody reclaim it. Also, frankly, it was like January that we started working on it, when the pandemic was really still at its absolute worst, and the joy that it brought for us all to see each other again, and to make something, right? You can see how happy everybody, look at all those smiles, right? Just to be with each other and to create something in the middle of this just worldwide collapse was very, very edifying. And the fact that it was Hamlet had a very special magic to it.
And so you mentioned a little bit earlier about how you were collaborating with sound design, and like on stage, you had mentioned earlier, was like set, lights, sound, costumes, sword fighting, everything. But now it's those elements don't exist except for sound, and your relationship with sound is a lot different. Can you talk a little bit about how you collaborate with the sound designer?
Well, I learned so much about it. Now, the outdoor theater at the Globe, the Lowell Davies Festival stage, people wear mics. So there is an important sound design element that you don't get in an acoustic theater environment. And so, like, what's that ghost going to sound like in his light up suit? You can do some things to give it an ethereal effect or a mechanical effect or something like that. So there is a little bit of that. But here, that's all you have. The only way you can communicate to the audience where things are, who's coming in, who's leaving, is through manipulating the sounds that you've got. We preserved the musical score from the production by the brilliant Curtis Moore, who's now, composing The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and winning all kinds of awards, right? So we were able to preserve his musical, very eccentric, sort of electronica, beatboxy kind of klezmer-y, weird sound that he made, right? And that was all made to fit what is a shorter version, because this is 2 hours. But the most extraordinary piece of it was being able to affect rhythmic changes, because the sound team, Lindsay Jones, Paul Peterson, I know you had Lindsay on, would line up all these different tracks from all the different actors. And if there was space between a line and you said, gee, I wish that scene could go faster, they could just clip it out, right? Amazing how that happened. And also you could say, wow, the first third of that scene, I love it in the first take, but let's take this line from the 5th take, and then let's go back to that other actor from their 3rd take, and you're assembling it like a film editor does. And it was extremely liberating and exciting. The glory of the theater is that it's happening live in front of you, and it is what it is, and it's affected by all these different things. And an actor's in a bad mood, he goes a little slow tonight, he takes too long a pause, you give him a note, the next night that pause is gone. Totally different thing here. The actors were well on the doing whatever, on to their next chapter in life. And Lindsay and I are going, let's cut some air there, let's move this to here, let's tighten that, let's make this move faster. Completely fun and eye-opening and ear-opening experience.
Oh my God, how many times do you think you had to listen to it?
I listened to it, oh my God, many times. And then we were able to do other things, like, there's a play within the play. So we thought, well, and we were listening to it, and it just sounded, when the actors started acting the play within the play, it sounded the same as everybody talking. That felt wrong. So I went to Lindsay and I said, in the stage production, we put up a little platform. Is there some way that we can capture the fact that the actors are on a stage? He goes to some God knows what library that he's got, and he finds the sonic profile of a historic theater in Stockholm. He didn't quite get Denmark, right? Didn't get Copenhagen, but
Scandinavia.
Scandinavia is close enough, fine. Right? And so he then is able to create what an actor sounds like on this actual place in Stockholm. And it's a certain reverb quality that the place has. And he applied that to these recordings that the actors made. So when you listen to the radio Hamlet, you'll hear an echoey effect when people are up on stage acting the play within the play. That's this actual theater in Stockholm, right? I mean, right? Crazy.
That is bonkers that it can be that specific. It's not just like reverb, sound good?
Totally that specific, and that's again, it's that collaboration thing. When you get great collaborators around you, the director goes, yeah, it just sounds too samey. The guys on stage sound like the guys that are just talking regular, and let's do that. Can you make it sound like it's a theater? 2 days later, I get these digital files back, and it's this historic theater in Stockholm, and you go, yeah, that's what I meant, and it's kind of.
What about the Royal Albert Hall?
Yeah, he can do, that's the thing. You can do all of that. You can totally do all of that, and you've got footsteps for people entering and exiting. You've got the sound of weather, right? One of the weird things, Justin, I will tell you, is that when I listen to the show and close my eyes, I actually don't see the physical production from 2017.
Really?
I know, it's so weird. The one day I'm sitting here in my, in my guest room now office, listening to it with headphones. And I totally recommend, if you're going to listen to the show, that you do it if you have them with headphones or with earbuds or with a very good set of speakers, because there's a degree of nuance there that a pair of computer speakers or your car radio won't give you. Anyway, and I'm just closing my eyes and listening, because I listened to the whole thing with my eyes closed. And I saw people in modern clothes. I saw people in naturalistic, sort of cinematic places in my imagination, totally different and completely surprising, because of course I knew what it looked like in 2017, but that went away.
That's amazing. They're all in closets across America.
Yeah. And in fact, the soundscape that Lindsay and his team have made is so rich, and the performances are so vivid, that when you listen, you begin to fill in all the visual details in your own terms and see.
It's so amazing.
It's great fun. Yes. I mean, I'm a total addict. I will tell you, these things are heavy lifts. It was a big show. And I remember our friends at the Public Theater did a radio Shakespeare early in the pandemic. So when we started putting ours together, I remember calling Oscar Eustis and saying, well, we're thinking we're going to do this radio Hamlet. What do you think? He said, well, however much time you think you need for post-production, double it. And, like this, we pressed send over to Kpbs at the last possible second.
Could have kept going.
Could have kept going. Yeah.
But I have one last question for you, Barry. So if now that you've done it twice, and if you were going to go back to it again, would you do it all the same? Would you do it differently? What have you learned from working on Hamlet that you didn't know before you did?
That's a great question. Here's something that I have found in the many times that I've been around the play, is that it's unique in Shakespeare in that the character of Hamlet is kind of a blank. It's very weird. You can go see Richard III the same 21 times that I've seen Hamlet, and you'll get an older guy, a younger guy, a woman playing it, a different race, but the character of Richard III is still there. Tweaked, inflected very slightly, right? Hamlet's not like that. Hamlet changes entirely based on who's playing that part. It's just uncanny. And I think some part of the weird alchemy of that play is its blankness, because it functions as a projection screen for all of us who are reading it, and for that actor coming in. I mean, Michael Stuhlbarg's Hamlet and Grantham Coleman's Hamlet and Kevin Kline's Hamlet, other than the accident that they said the same words in the same order, could not have been more different, and each completely compelling, So what I find as I keep returning to it is there's some other little piece of me that I see reflected in it that next time that I come. So I don't know, 6 years from now, 10 years from now, by that time, my children are grown up and starting their life. God knows what I'm going to find in it that will resonate differently at that point in my life than it is doing right now, than it did 4 years ago. And that's the joy of it. It is this bottomless artifact that keeps touching our lives in surprising and unanticipated ways. And that's why we keep going again and again and again to look at it.
That's why we're celebrating his 400th something birthday tomorrow.
Yep.
Exactly. It's like he's here because of that.
But, the two gentlemen of Verona didn't make it to the same vaunted place in the culture that Hamlet did, right? There is just something about this play that calls to us and asks us to imprint ourselves on it that is very, very unique.
Well, I think that segues great into the first question that I have from our audience. Is you had said earlier that it's a young man's play. This is from Sue Parker. What do you think of the recent version that Ian McKellen's going to come and play Hamlet? I know I saw the what was his name? Oh my God, I forgot about it. I'll forget. I'll think of it while you talk. But
okay.
What do you think of it of playing an octogenarian playing Hamlet?
I think it's great. I say God bless him. More power to him. Why not? Why live your life according to somebody else's idea of propriety, right? He wants to do it. Let him do it. What we know about him is he is an endlessly resourceful actor, blessed with rich emotional reserves, and a technician of Shakespeare par excellence. He's got this toolkit to be able to do it. Now, one asks, okay, how are they going to handle the rest of it? Is Ophelia also going to be an octogenarian? How old are his parents going to have to be, right? If he's the age that he is. And clearly they're not going to deal with the realism of it. It's just going to be, let's celebrate this beautiful language to do it. And I'm incredibly excited. Here's something, is that Kevin Kline texted me and said, McKellen's doing it. Wonder if I should. And I was like, yeah, man, do it. Do it. Come to the Globe and do it.
Yeah.
We're ready to go.
Yeah.
So,
I saw the Simon Russell Beale was the one that I was thinking.
Oh, yeah.
And when he was, for me, it was difficult. I had a hard time believing. I was like, really? It's like Polonius is playing Hamlet.
Yeah.
Maybe I just didn't like him.
It's possible, yeah. But I mean, I think if you look at it, again, like the production of Hamlet you're seeing on any given night is never the definitive one, So just collector's item. Okay, saw that one. Learned this about it. Yep. Cool. Next.
Excellent. This is a question about, I was going to ask this and I started running out of time. So you use music so beautifully in your shows. Like how do you use the music in live production, and how did you adapt it for the radio play?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love using music in theater. It's so eloquent. It sets mood. It transports you to another time. It also has propulsion in it. And so from my earliest part of my career, when I first started out as a director, I always had music in it. Sometimes found music, sometimes pop music, as in the Romeo and Juliet that we did in 2019, but often with a composer. And Curtis and I did a Timon of Athens in New York together with Richard Thomas. And we did the Othello that I did here at the Globe. He's just a wonderful theater composer. He's got a couple of I've got a couple of musicals of his I owe him a response to, that he was kind enough to send to the Globe. The one thing that we do is all of the composers that I've worked with, is we take sort of a cinematic approach to it, which is that we attach themes to characters. So Ophelia has a theme that shows up again and again and again. Claudius has a theme that shows up again and again and again. There's a death theme that shows up again and again and again. And if you listen carefully to the score of the show, it's arranged in a symphonic way, whereas a theme will be introduced, then some variations will be played on it, and then the theme will return and carry with it all that stuff that it's had over the course of the night. And Curtis is phenomenal at that in this particular score. One of the big differences is that that stage out there is big, and scene changes that have those big pieces of scaffolding moving around take time, and the music helps fill that time with something interesting, right? The radio, we're not moving any scenery around. So Lindsay and Paul really chopped those music cues down in a way that Curtis listened to and was totally cool with, but you don't get all the compositional flair that you heard when those cues were 15 or 20 seconds long, as opposed to 4 seconds long as they are in the radio version.
I mean, it's such an interesting point. You're like, oh, it's radio, let's listen to the music. But you're listening to a story, and if you take a detour for 30 seconds, you might. No good.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of the things you learn real fast is silence is not your friend, right? On the stage, silence can be so powerful, right? But on the radio, silence sounds like there's a mistake at the studio. And so you have to really, we were scrupulous about deploying silence sparingly and strategically and consciously.
Is this thing on?
Exactly. Yeah. What happened to my radio? Right.
Did it go out?
Yeah.
So this is more an idea to talk about, like in talking about how you approach the radio version. It sounded a lot like how Richard Nelson approached his production of Uncle Vanya in the Cheryl and Harvey White Theater a couple years ago. Very kind of like that interior speaking voice. Like I thought that was a really astute comment, and so I posed that to you. Like, How does that change? Is there things that you learned in radio that you can translate to the stage?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in the end, as you'll hear when you listen to it, we decided to go more to a kind of quite robust vocal approach and reserve that microphone strategically for places where we really wanted that intimacy. The Richard Nelson reference is this genius director who came to the Globe a couple of years ago and did Uncle Vanya. And he's been working on for years now this approach to a conversational style in the theater for his own plays and also for the plays of Chekhov, where he invented a technique of hanging how many, 30 microphones in the air, just a few feet above the actors' heads, which allow them to speak very, very conversationally and not project. So the microphones pick up their voices, and then a series of speakers discreetly amplifies in ways that theoretically and in practice, in fact, you're not quite aware of. Just sounds like you're eavesdropping on a conversation, which absolves the actors of that theatrical, I have to, and the acting can become a little bit more psychological and a little bit more relational to each other. And it's fantastic. Now, interestingly, when we work out on that outdoor theater, if we wanted, we could do that because the actors have mics. They're little wireless mics that they wear over their ear or here in their forehead. And if they wanted, they could talk like this and the sound system would get them out into the house. But the physical energy of that big theater seems to want something more. So it's an interesting thing. And, Justin, back as early as like the American avant-garde of the late 60s, when microphone technology got small enough for it to be hidden from the audience's view, there have been many, many experiments with using amplified sound to absolve the actors of a kind of 19th century need for declaiming and oratory. And those experiments will continue, I think.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating. I mean, like it is that, with such a big place, if you were not moving and talking very slowly and not moving around, you wouldn't know who was talking from the back row. You'd
disappear. You'd evaporate into the ether, even though the audience could hear your words, know.
Are there, so here's a question about, Hamlet's 4 hours long, but now we're doing 2 hours on the radio. How did you make the choices to keep what was kept and what was jettisoned in the name of brevity?
Yeah, well, we got rid of not to be. So it's just to be.
It's solved.
Yeah, it's a great question. The production outside was about 2 hours and 45 minutes, maybe 250, something like that. Again, sort of inside baseball, but we try and keep the shows under 3 hours at the Globe because the different pay scales kick in. If you cross that 3 hour threshold, different security issues happen in Balboa Park if people are leaving too late. So at the Globe, we try very hard to start at 8 and be done before 11. So that fourth hour of Shakespeare's script just isn't really producible in our circumstances. I've only seen it uncut once, which is the Kenneth Branagh movie, which is every single word of those 4 hours. But nobody.
VHS tapes.
Sorry?
2 VHS tapes.
2 VHS tapes, right? It's worth seeing just because you go, that's in that play? I had no idea. But the modern American theater and the modern British theater, English language theater around the world, we don't do these plays uncut. We condense them, we streamline them. Tastes change over time. So there were periods, at the height of the Royal Shakespeare Company, they prided themselves on very long, relatively sparely cut texts. Nowadays, let's get it down to 90 minutes, just like every other play that the theater produces worldwide, right? That Romeo and Juliet that the National Theater has on TV tomorrow night, 90 minutes long. Ours was much longer than that. Ours was 2.5 when we did that. So the version that we did was shortened in the first place. What do you cut? You cut the stuff that doesn't directly drive the story. So, there's a wonderful scene where Polonius sends a spy after his son in Paris. Terrific scene. Does expand upon and add richness to the character of Polonius, but it is expendable to the story. So you cut stuff like that. Shakespeare repeats himself frequently because the audience circumstances of his day were people coming in and out very, very freely. It was broad daylight. So Shakespeare, as a rule, repeats pieces of information 3 times, and he'll tell you what's about to happen. He'll tell you what is now happening, and then he'll tell you what just happened. So you can trim some of that. And then you go into the longer speeches and say, there's this 5th and 6th piece of the list. Maybe I can get rid of that. So that's how we got to the version outside. Kpbs told us that we could do whatever we wanted, but it would be nice if each episode was 58 minutes and 30 seconds so that it would fit neatly into an hour. And I took it on as a challenge. And so we started with that 2017 version and cut from there. The first thing that went is the character Fortinbras and the whole political invasion of Denmark by Norway, which just, that was good for 10 or 12 minutes of stage time right there. And then you just trim. In the first scene of Shakespeare's play, the ghost appears, he goes away, he comes back a second time, and there's a long conversation in between the ghost's first and second appearance about the war footing that Denmark is on. That's gone. In our version, the ghost comes once, goes. So it just flies. I actually really love it. You know, all the greatest hits are there. No characters are cut. It's the story completely intact, and you follow it, with the exception of Fortinbras is the only thing that's really gone. But it's got a speed to it, and it's got a clarity to it, and a directness to it that's quite wonderful. Painful to cut stuff, you know. There's some beautiful language that's on the cutting room floor, but for the greater purpose of a wonderful entertainment for 2 hours, it's very, very successful.
I saw a little thing about Hamlet where it was like, you know, the lead character is kidnapped by pirates at some point in the middle of the play, and it's not really a major plot point.
Right. I know, that weird. Like, why is that?
Really?
Yeah.
It's astute and true and very odd. It's
Very, very odd.
Okay.
He's not kidnapped by pirates in this version of the play. Yeah. There's a lot we could talk about. There's the 3 period printings of the play, and this production borrows from the earliest printing of Hamlet a couple of story points that the subsequent printings of Hamlet in Shakespeare's period got rid of. So there's a lot we could talk about how the script is put together. But basically, I took as a challenge, you remember we had that conversation with Kpbs and said, okay, if we're going to fit it in an hour, how long's it got to be? They said 58:30. I said, challenge accepted. The first half is like 57 minutes. Second half is literally 58:20. Right? We came in right under the wire.
Nailed it.
It was fun challenge to set ourselves to make it fit in that available time.
Yeah. And I love parameters I find parameters to be so liberating.
The secret to good art is limitation.
Yeah. Just give me a box to work in, and I'll know. But if I have to decide what the box is before I even start working, then I get paralyzed by choice.
Absolutely right. Nothing makes better art than limitations. True.
That's amazing.
True is.
I'm going to finish with one last quick question. Rapid fire. So you say you've seen 20 something versions other than your own. Granted, which one's your favorite?
Okay. 2 on film. There's a Russian Soviet era film by Kozintsev, the great filmmaker Kozintsev, starring an amazing actor named Innokenty Smoktanovsky. And he is...
Can you spell that?
I can't. Innokenty Smoktanovsky. And so Kozintsev, Hamlet, Kozintsev, and it's this amazing, bleak, black and white, Northern European, extraordinary production of the play. That's tops in my list. It's in Russian. Bergman's Hamlet on stage, which was in Swedish, also fantastic. But I have a real soft spot for Kevin Kline's Hamlet because I spent so much time watching it. But there's this thing about Kevin. He's you know, I guess he's very highly heralded, but I sort of wish that he were better recognized as the greatest American classical actor, which is what he is. And he has a 19th century kind of flair for the expressive power of this language, and we have an homage to him in this that Grantham and I agreed on, which is this one line, which I won't tell you what it is, where we're channeling Kevin's ability to find a central idea in Shakespeare and let it fly like an opera singer. He's unbelievable. Nobody I know comes close to that ability. And so Grantham had one in Hamlet. Aaron Clifton Moten had a Kevin Kline moment in his Romeo and Juliet. I in his Romeo that he played, I always try and put a Kevin homage into the Shakespeares that I do, because nobody in America handles this language like he does.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, you handle the language like he does because you're able to help him with it.
I'm sorry, I cannot let that go on the record. Everything, no. Everything I know about how actors do Shakespeare comes from Kevin. And his Hamlet was really, really special, fast and funny because of course he's such an amazing comedian, and so full of heart. It was very, very special. I mean, maybe somebody out there in our audience saw it at the Public Theater in I don't know when that was, 90, 91. Wow. Really amazing. It's on TV. You can see it. Great Performances captured it. So you can see that. See, he's awesome.
I mean, he is a treasure, and that's amazing. That's so great. Some deep cuts and some stuff that we can find.
Yeah.
I love it. Barry, as always, it is a pleasure to be amongst your eloquence and
Justin,
hear all the amazing things you have to say tonight. I really, really appreciate your time, and congratulations and mazel tov on the opening of Hamlet on the radio.
Thank you.
It is a labor of love for all of us here at the Globe.
And you too. Congratulations to you on making it happen. Beautiful work.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to wrap up a little bit, but thank you again. Thank you for giving the time, and thank you for all that you do for the Globe and San Diego.
Thank you.
I'd like to once again thank Vicki and Carl Zeiger for their support of these Insight seminars, and Joanne Kilty for her support of my small part in this. A huge thanks to our philanthropy department, especially Haley Meyer and Matthew Lovegood, who put together the PowerPoints and do all the behind the scenes work to make this possible. If you enjoyed tonight, I invite you once again to visit our website and make a gift to our Globe Rising campaign. And the thing of the hour, Hamlet on the Radio, premieres tomorrow night, April 23rd at 7 p.m. on Kpbs 89.5 FM on your radio dial, with part 1 followed by part 2 on Saturday, April 24th at 7 p.m. You can hear the piece in its entirety on Sunday, May the 2nd at 2 p.m. with subsequent airings June 18th, 19th, and 27th. The full schedule can be found on the Globe's website. Also, while you're on the website, please take a look at the many humanities offerings that we have surrounding Hamlet on the Radio. You'll find Barry's Thinking Live, Infinite Book, more Insight seminars with other Hamlet on the Radio artists, Danielle Mage's Amato on book conversations, and launching next Wednesday is a digital tour of our 2016 First Folio exhibit that was at the San Diego Central Library, which is super cool. You have to navigate around and see that exhibit for yourself again, which is fantastic. Well, this concludes our series of talks on Hamlet on the Radio. Please keep your eyes peeled for more information about future Vicki and Carl Zeiger virtual Insight seminars and all the incredible humanities and arts engagements programs happening at the Globe. And there's a lot of exciting things coming up, so please keep your eyes peeled. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Barry. Thank you to everybody in San Diego and all of you people who stayed around with us. And we'll see you at the theater in Balboa Park very soon. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.